Today, the Prime Minister will say she has a plan which would see £20 billion more for the health service in England by 2023. Well, Niall Dickson is the Chief Executive of the NHS Confederation. Joins us now from our London newsroom. And good morning to you. Your reaction to this announcement from Theresa May?
Well, I think our members will want to see some of the detail, but it is a welcome boost after, really, we've had nearly a decade of almost no extra funding for the health service in real terms. So this is significant, and it's a significant sum of money. It is short of what the independent analysis which we got done, which suggested it needs 4% a year. This looks like 3.4%, so it is short of that. But I think overall we should welcome it, and we should welcome the stability that it'll bring if we're right in thinking that we know what we're going to get between now and over the next 5 years. But I think the problem will be, how do we spend that money? And there will have to be some hard choices.
The numbers are bafflingly large, aren't they? So I wonder, in practical terms, what difference does this money make, or could it make?
Well, if we'd gone on as we are, I think the wheels would have essentially continued to start falling off the health service, and staff would have been under even more pressure. So it should relieve some of that. I hope it will enable us to really put some money into transformation, by which I mean not continuing simply just to prop up the hospital system, but actually to start putting money into the community and into services which will prevent particularly elderly people ending up at the hospital door, and we've not succeeded yet in doing that at a real industrial scale. And I think that is probably the biggest challenge we face, along with workforce, because you can have all the money in the world, but if you haven't got the people to do the jobs, then that's going to be a very significant challenge as well over the next few years.
Does it matter to you where the money comes from? There's this whole discussion, isn't there, around the so-called Brexit dividend. Some economists suggesting that it doesn't exist, but the Prime Minister's referring to it. She's also hinting at tax rises. From the perspective of the NHS, I guess money is money, but at the same time, the health service has to be able to make the public case that if there are higher taxes, for instance, it's money worth spending.
Yes, I think we have to make that case, whether you regard it as a Brexit dividend or whether it's coming through higher taxation. And there certainly will be people who will say, quite rightly, well, is the NHS going to spend this money effectively? Are we going to get value for the extra public spending which we're putting into the service? And to which I would respond and say, I think the service is very much for changing the way in which healthcare is organised. That's not the fault of doctors and nurses, or indeed managers on the front line. It's the reality of the kind of challenges which we face over the next 10 years, which are certainly different from those, say, at the beginning of this millennium, when really the issue was, could we get faster treatment, could we get more people pushed through hospital? Now the challenge is a rapidly growing older population, which will see 4.4 million more people in the next 10 years over 65, and a huge increase in the number of over 85s. And we need to find a better way of treating and supporting them. I'm hoping that this money will enable us to start doing that. It isn't as much, as I say, as the independent analysis suggested we do need, but we'll have to work with what we've got.
And Neil, you hinted at this a couple of moments ago, but if you could flesh out for us, given that we see so many headlines around this morning about this, quote-unquote, huge cash injection into the NHS, how this sits in the broader context in terms of the kind of funding rises that the NHS has seen over recent decades, not just the relative pullback in terms of additional money that's gone in the last few years.
So if you were to look at a graph of the funding of the health service, it looks like the Himalayas. It goes up and down all the time, and that creates instability within the system. So this is good because it's predicting something, a pretty flat line, and that's a good thing. If you look historically, though, by 2009, if you went from 2009 all the way back to 1948, you would see that on average across that period, admittedly with these ups and downs, it was 3.7%. We're now looking at 3.4% over this next period. So it's a little under what the health service had over that period. That earlier period was distorted by the years from around 2002 to 2009, where there was a massive boost. So before then, it is about what the health service used to get on a kind of average basis. So going forward, this isn't a bonanza by any means, and the challenges ahead are very considerable, but it's a lot better than we've been used to over the last few years.
Thank you for talking to us. We appreciate it. Niall Dickson there, the Chief Executive of the NHS Confederation.